10 catastrophes whose aftermath forced rules, designs, and assumptions to change. This countdown moves from number 10 to number 1, with each archive leading into the next. We begin with Great Molasses Flood, how one disaster unfolded. The Great Molasses Flood, also known as the Boston Molasses Disaster, was a disaster that occurred on January 15, 1919, in the North End neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts. A large storage tank filled with 2.3 million US gallons, 8,700 cubic meters, of molasses, weighing approximately 13,000 short tons, 12,000 metric tons, burst, and the resultant wave of molasses rushed through the streets at an estimated 35 miles per hour, 56 kilometers per hour, killing 21 and injuring 150 people. Following a 2-week-long cleanup effort, the event entered local folklore, and residents reported for decades afterwards that the area still smelled of molasses on hot summer days. The failure exposed by Great Molasses Flood leads to 1975 Banqiao Dam failure, where a different chain of decisions produced lasting reform. At number 9, 1975 Banqiao Dam failure, how one disaster unfolded. In August 1975, the Banqiao Dam and 61 others throughout Henan, China, collapsed following the landfall of Typhoon Nina. The ensuing flood was among the deadliest floods in China, and was the third deadliest flood in history, which affected 12,000 square kilometers, 3 million acres, with a total population of 10.15 million, including around 30 cities and counties, with estimates of the death toll ranging from 26,000 to 240,000. The flood also caused the collapse of 5 million to 6.8 million houses. The dam failure took place in the context of the Cultural Revolution. The failure exposed by 1975 Banqiao Dam failure leads to Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, where a different chain of decisions produced lasting reform. At number 8, Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, how one disaster unfolded. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire occurred in the Greenwich Village neighborhood of Manhattan, a borough of New York City, on Saturday, March 25, 1911. The fire was the deadliest industrial disaster in the history of the city, and one of the deadliest in U.S. history. The fire caused the deaths of 146 garment workers, 123 women and girls and 23 men, who died from either the fire, smoke inhalation, or falling or jumping to their deaths. Most of the victims were recent Italian and Jewish immigrants aged 14 to 23. The factory was located on the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors of the Ask Building, later the Brown Building, which was built in 1901 and remains standing on the New York University, NYU, campus at 23 to 29 Washington Place, near Washington Square Park. The failure exposed by Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire leads to Sultana, Steamboat, where a different chain of decisions produced lasting reform. At number 7, Sultana, Steamboat, how one disaster unfolded. Sultana was a commercial side-wheel steamboat which exploded and sank on the Mississippi River on April 27, 1865, killing 1,164 people in what remains the worst maritime disaster in United States history. Constructed of wood in 1863 by the John Litherbury Boatyard in Cincinnati, Ohio, Sultana was intended for the lower Mississippi cotton trade. The steamer registered 1,719 tons and normally carried a crew of 85. For 2 years, she ran a regular route between St. Louis and New Orleans and was frequently commissioned to carry troops during the American Civil War. The failure exposed by Sultana, Steamboat, leads to P.S. General Slocum, where a different chain of decisions produced lasting reform. At number 6, P.S. General Slocum, how one disaster unfolded. P.S. General Slocum was an American sidewheel passenger steamboat built in Brooklyn, New York, in 1891. During her service history, she was involved in a number of mishaps, including multiple groundings and collisions. On June 15, 1904, General Slocum caught fire and sank in the East River of New York City. At the time of the disaster, she was on a chartered run carrying members of St. Mark's Evangelical Lutheran Church, German Americans from Little Germany, Manhattan, to a church picnic. An estimated 1,021 out of the 1,342 people on board died. The failure exposed by P.S. General Slocum leads to SS Eastland, where a different chain of decisions produced lasting reform. At number 5, SS Eastland, how one disaster unfolded. SS Eastland was an American Great Lakes passenger ship. On July 24, 1915, the ship capsized while tied to a dock in the Chicago River. In total, 844 passengers and crew were killed in what is, as of 2026, the largest loss of life from a shipwreck on the Great Lakes and the Chicago area. After the disaster, Eastland was salvaged and sold to the United States Navy. After restorations and modifications, Eastland was designated a gunboat and renamed USS Wilmette. She was used primarily as a training vessel on the Great Lakes, and was scrapped after World War II. The failure exposed by SS Eastland leads to Tacoma Narrows Bridge, 1940, where a different chain of decisions produced lasting reform. At number 4, Tacoma Narrows Bridge, 1940. How one disaster unfolded. The 1940 Tacoma Narrows Bridge, the first bridge at this location, was a suspension bridge in the U.S. state of Washington that spanned the Tacoma Narrows Strait of Puget Sound between Tacoma and the Kitsap Peninsula. It opened to traffic on July 1, 1940, and dramatically collapsed into Puget Sound on November 7 of the same year. The bridge's collapse has been described as spectacular, and in subsequent decades, has attracted the attention of engineers, physicists, and mathematicians. Throughout its short existence, it was the world's third longest suspension bridge by main span, behind the Golden Gate Bridge and the George Washington Bridge. The failure exposed by Tacoma Narrows Bridge, 1940, leads to Hyatt Regency Walkway collapse, where a different chain of decisions produced lasting reform. At number 3, Hyatt Regency Walkway collapse, how one disaster unfolded. On July 17, 1981, 2 overhead walkways in the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Kansas City, Missouri, collapsed, killing 114 people and injuring 216. Loaded with partygoers, the concrete and glass platforms crashed onto a tea dance in the lobby. The collapse resulted in billions of dollars of insurance claims, legal investigations, and city government reforms. The hotel had been built just a few years before, during a nationwide pattern of fast-tracked large construction with reduced oversight and major failures. Its roof had partially collapsed during construction, and the ill-conceived skywalk design progressively degraded due to a miscommunication loop of corporate neglect and irresponsibility. The failure exposed by Hyatt Regency Walkway collapse leads to Tenerife Airport disaster, where a different chain of decisions produced lasting reform. At number 2, Tenerife Airport disaster, how one disaster unfolded. On the 27th of March 1977, 2 Boeing 747 passenger jets collided on a runway at Los Rodeos Airport, now Tenerife North Ciudad de la Laguna Airport, on the Spanish island of Tenerife, killing 583 people and injuring 61 others in the deadliest accident in aviation history. The incident occurred at 17:06 Greenwich Mean Time, UTC+0, in dense fog, when KLM Flight 4805 initiated its takeoff run, colliding with the right side of Pan Am Flight 1736, which was on the runway. The impact and the resulting fire killed all 248 people on board the KLM plane and 335 of the 396 people on board the Pan Am plane, with all 61 survivors being in the front section of the aircraft. The failure exposed by Tenerife Airport disaster leads to Silvertown explosion, where a different chain of decisions produced lasting reform. At number 1, Silvertown explosion, how one disaster unfolded. The Silvertown explosion occurred in Silvertown in West Ham, Essex, now part of the London Borough of Newham, on Friday, the 19th of January 1917 at 6:52 p.m. The blast occurred at a munitions factory that was manufacturing explosives for Britain's First World War military effort. Approximately 50 tons of trinitrotoluene, TNT, exploded, killing 73 people and injuring 400 more, as well as causing substantial damage in the local area. This was not the first, last, largest, or the most deadly explosion at a munitions facility in Britain during the war. An explosion at Faversham involving 200 long tons, 200 tons, of TNT killed 105 in 1916, and the National Shell Filling Factory, Chilwell, exploded in 1918, killing 137. That was top 10 disasters that changed safety forever. Every story in this countdown began as a shorter archive, but the connections only appear when the files are placed together. Subscribe for the next collection.